This is kind of the new front line of brand storytelling.
Where's the AI tech startups? Where are they going to go?
It's a great opportunity for anywhere outside of the US to start doing this right now.
Will this actually boost the UK, or is this just the reach? It's just another reach from US big tech just benefiting.
Hello and welcome to episode 98 of Disconnected. I'm your host, Jag Sharma, joined by Jen Campbell in Hong Kong, Matt Webster in Rio de Janeiro, and special guest Chris Baker, who is currently in Hong Kong but is based all over the world. And together we'll be delving into the world of AI, tech and social media and how it's impacting society and culture. Coming up, Matt's going to tell us why Donald Trump plus King Charles plus Nvidia equals the UK being a new global tech hub. And special guest Chris Baker takes us through his view on changing consumer trends. So, Chris, you're CEO of Totem and you're based between Asia and North America. Why don't you tell us a bit more about yourself and a bit more about Totem?
Thanks, Jag. Nice to see you, Jen and Matt. So yeah, indeed, I am running an agency called Totem. We're a brand and digital agency. We got our start in China about 10 years ago, and the vast majority of our work is involved helping global brands enter China and succeed in that market. So I tallied up the number of brands the other day. It's approaching about 100 brands that we've worked with over the last 10 years. So, some big ones like Disney and Intel, Inditex, amongst a lot of others, and then a lot of kind of medium-sized and DTC brands in the mix there as well. But since COVID and the slowdown that took place in and around China, we've done a lot more work across Asia and globally on helping brands kind of project out what does the future of digital branding and marketing look like. And a large part of the answer to that question is that, we think it looks a lot more like what's been happening in China with respect to digital and branding. So we apply some of the really interesting lessons that we've learned from on the ground in China to markets like Japan, Korea, Southeast Asia, and to a lesser degree, North America, where I'm based with my family most of the time.
I'm sure you get asked this question a lot, but 10 years of running Totem and having a lot of clients in China, what would you say has been the biggest change in China that you've seen over the past 10 years?
Wow, that's a big question. I mean, well, so much of that is informed by what's happened in the last 5 years or so since COVID. But putting that aside, it's a market that has just accelerated within the 10-year time frame beyond what I think I would have expected. And the pace of change there is unlike anywhere else in the world. When I try to explain the China marketing ecosystem to people in North America and Europe, what I've said to them is, for 10 years, or let's say the last 20 years, really, that market has been among the most progressive, innovative in the world, because you had agency leaders, top brand people from client side and brands, all converging on the market because it was sort of seen as the big prize, right? And so that's just meant that the speed, pace, of innovation has been, beyond what most of us can kind of stand to keep up with, right? It's really pedal to the metal.
No, totally.
Yeah.
And am I right in thinking you speak Mandarin as well?
I do. Yeah. I moved to Hong Kong in year 2000. I made valiant attempts to learn Cantonese, but I always tell the story. I get into a taxi in Hong Kong and try to speak a little bit of Cantonese. The taxi drivers, who are notoriously busy and manic, kind of just urge me on and tell me to speak English. When I moved to Beijing, I'd say hello in Chinese and was quickly met with warm response. Oh, your Chinese is so good, and very encouraging, right? So that added to the fact that living in Beijing for 7 years, it would have been near impossible not to have learned Chinese, meant that after I sold out of my previous agency and had my first son, I took 6-8 months and did intensive Chinese. So that really helped me move that along.
Wow. See, Jen, if we made the effort and learned the language, maybe we could progress
What are you
in
talking
our
about?
lives.
I'm
also.
fluent. Just because you've got issues, it's got nothing to do with
What
me,
are you
my
fluent
friend.
in?
Cantonese, for sure. You've just never tested me.
Oh, really?
Anyway, we haven't got time for this. Keep moving on.
Okay.
Lots to cover, lots to cover.
Yes. Yeah, no, we have. No, we're brilliant. Well, thank you, Chris, for coming on the pod. Yeah, very excited to have you on the pod and excited to hear what you have to tell us about changing consumer trends a bit later on. But yeah, why don't we kick things off? And do you know what, Matt? You've got something exciting to tell us that involves King Charles, Donald Trump, and all sorts of other things.
Yeah, I've been doing a bit of detective work. I feel a bit like Columbo, just following some golden nuggets of news. And obviously there's a lot of news that gets showered on us constantly at the moment. As of yesterday, there was like 17 major headlines from the UN Assembly. But I focused into some things. And as you mentioned, it's King Charles, the royals, Trump, and NVIDIA, and how they're going to take the UK back into the limelight in the future. And the UK is going to be the future land of the megatechs. And the reason why I came up with this, and I've decided that this is a potential possible future. So we all know that it was well publicized. The royals, all the tech CEOs with Trump sat down for a big banquet in Windsor. And shortly afterwards, Trump had a love-in session with Keir Starmer, and out of that came the tech prosperity deal. And this was a pledge from the US to invest $150 billion into the UK. Pounds, actually, I think it is, which is a substantial amount. This is going to create jobs, over 7,500 new jobs. You've got investors from the big hitters like Microsoft, Google, and the shadowy Blackstone investing almost 90 billion of that 150 billion that's been promised. But apart from talking about AI and quantum computers and nuclear power and how it's going to help the UK, there was a few voices saying, will this actually boost the UK? Or is this just the reach? It's just another reach from US big tech just benefiting. So there was a bit of kind of smiles and frowns from that. The very next day, Trump announces that the H-1B visa, this is the visa where foreign nationals can come to the US and if they're talented, they can work in the US in positions, even though they're not US citizens. So the H-1B visa, it used to cost $1,000. Trump, the day, he lands after having expensive spaghetti with King Charles and hikes the H-1B visa from $1,000 to $100,000. So slamming the door shut, seemingly, on a lot of these foreign nationals that come into the US. And about 70% of these are Indians. So they're Indian Americans. They go to Palo Alto, they go to Austin, they work at Meta, Apple, Google, Microsoft, the big ones, Alphabet. But now it's $100K per H-1B visa. So what does that mean? Well, it means that these big tech companies will probably swallow that cost because they can, or maybe they'll move some operations to Vancouver. But what about AI tech startups? They cannot afford to go from 1K to 100K for the talent to come into the US. So it got me thinking, where's the AI tech startups? Where are they going to go? And I got an answer 2 days later. So we haven't finished a week of news here yet in this little breadcrumbs trail that I'm talking you through. On the 22nd of September, after that weekend of the H-1B visa being announced, NVIDIA comes out and says, we're investing £2 billion in AI startups. We're going to strengthen the hubs in London, Oxford, Cambridge, and Manchester. And then this is beautiful. And is it coincidental, but is it hilarious? Quote from Jensen Huang, who's the founder and CEO of NVIDIA. He says, this is the age of AI, the big bang of a new industrial revolution. The UK is in a Goldilocks moment, and we're seeing universities, bold startups, leading research, and cutting-edge supercomputing converging in the UK. So that got me thinking, well, hang on. So the AI tech startups in the US can't afford their H-1B visas anymore, but NVIDIA's pretty much just announced it's investing all this money in AI tech startups in the UK. So there you go. That's what's going to happen. They're going to move to the UK, thanks to NVIDIA, who were rejected by China recently. And this is a question I'll put to you guys. In 20 years' time, 30 years' time, are all the big tech megacorps going to be based in Cambridge, Manchester, London, and Edinburgh? Because there's now a melting pot of AI tech startups that can work there easier than the door that's just been slammed in the US. Detective spiel over. Am I right, or am I just a QAnon conspiracy theorist that needs to get back in my crazy box? Over to you guys.
I think this is super interesting because we've spoken so many times about how the UK is always behind. So with every kind of tech, but specifically AI tech, it's been led by the US and China. They've always come out with bigger, better, bolder things. And the UK and Europe, to some extent, have been left behind. So it would be foolish for the UK not to cash in on this right now, right? Like, they should be going all guns blazing. Make those visas free, for goodness sake. Get these people in, get the business running. It's what the UK needs. Do I think that's what they're going to do? No, absolutely not. I think they'll be given a golden ticket and they'll blow it in the wind and forget that ever happened. And, eventually it'll all come back to the US and China are ruling things again. I don't think we have a particularly strong history in the UK of people taking these sorts of things, these opportunities, and running with them. That said, there is an awful lot of talent in the UK, and there are a lot of reasons why people would want to move to businesses there. There's a stability, there's lots of things. It does have a lot going for it. Not that I'm planning on moving to the UK anytime soon.
Great weather.
They've got great crisps, let's be honest. I mean, if you're going to go anywhere, that's what you're going for. So I live in hope that they might take this advantage and run with it. The cynic in me believes they will not. And what will happen is these visas will get overturned, or there'll be some sort of clause that says it's 100K unless you're an AI startup, and in which case you can have the visa. They'll make a reason for it, and only the banks will end up paying for it, something like that. But yeah, I mean, it's a great opportunity for anywhere outside of the US to start doing this right now.
But sorry, guys, before you come in, here's another plot twist, though, on that, Jen. The UK government very recently announced that the hole that they've got to cover, the debt, is 30 billion in the next government announcement. So, I mean, isn't this like on a plate?
Yeah, but you're assuming they're applying that sort of logic. They've come out and said there's this debt, but they didn't say, and don't worry, we've got a plan. They basically went, oh shit, we've got a big hole. How are we going to fill that?
Right. Well, let's run for the next general election, me and you. Then I don't know what the name of our party is going to be, like the tech party.
I think you have to be in the UK for that sort of thing, and I don't think either of us are planning on moving to the UK anytime soon, are we?
Well, crisps and weather.
Well, as a Canadian, I'm taking some comfort in our shared skepticism of our home countries. There's been a lot made of this story even prior to this recent announcement about how Canada would be the beneficiary of tech workers coming north and diverting away from the US because of concerns around politics. And it's not well known, but the University of Toronto was a hotbed for some of the early research in AI, and still is a place that all the top tech companies kind of pick off talent from. Having said all that, being as close as we are to the US, we've not as yet really seen that flood of talent coming in, right? I just think that there's such gravity around the big players in the US that they tend to kind of overcome these things inevitably.
Matt, you mentioned that fancy spaghetti that Trump and the King were eating. Did you notice just how badly Trump was eating? And then Charlie had to change the cutlery around so that Trump picked up the right fork and knife at the right time.
I don't believe Charlie actually moved the cutlery. I'm sure one of his head butlers did it. He did it.
He did it. He sat next to him.
Jesus. I mean, nothing surprises me when it comes to Donald Trump. But just to, Yeah, I saw the picture. He was kind of, it looked like my 6-year-old daughter eating spaghetti from a bowl.
I think they served that on purpose.
Do you think that, because that's a bit conspiracy, because I think they stopped the escalators on purpose, and I think they turned off the teleprompter on purpose at the UN Assembly. So maybe there are these little kind of things that are, that's trolling, like real life trolling.
I think Trump with a teleprompter is probably better. But yeah, I think the food was on purpose because the guy he's normally eating like burgers. So he's not used to.
It actually takes a little bit of skill and intellect to kind of twist a fork around the pasta, doesn't it? You actually need to have lived in the real world slightly to be able to perform that act of eating spaghetti. So yeah, it was out of his skill set, and he came up looking stupid.
He's a great pasta eater. Everyone in Italy says so.
Okay.
Back on topic. I think I agree with you, Matt. The UK's been handed a significant strategic opportunity. The US, it's a self-inflicted wound on talent mobility. The UK has an inherent strength in terms of talent mobility, and so there is a compelling narrative there. However, as we touched upon, we mentioned Canada. It's not just Canada, not just the UK. Other countries can be a beneficiary of this as well. Germany, France, other European hubs will, aggressively compete for the same opportunities here. But then let's not forget, for what Jenna said, the UK has its own historical challenges. And the UK has long suffered from a scale-up gap, where we get these brilliant startups from Tech Hub in the Silicon Roundabout that are then just sold to US companies or even sold to European companies. And so, this is going to require something long-term. The recipe is there, but whichever country invests long-term, homegrown, world-dominating, that's what it's going to need for, the scale-up issues to be addressed and for there to be, a real long-term challenger, an alternative to the US.
Okay, you and Jen are right, and we remember Cambridge Analytica. They were even in the Facebook movie, and what happened to them. A lot of potential there, and I don't know what happened to them. They probably went to the US. Again, you're right, you and Jen, because the US will find ways round it. But they were mentioning places like Vancouver when the H-1B visa hike news came out. But it's the NVIDIA announcement 2 days later, which has got me all frothy and excited about the UK, because they're not just investing $2 billion in AI startups. I forgot to mention, and I'll leave this one with you. They're investing $11 billion also on top of that in AI factories in the UK, which they're saying that the investment will be complete by the end of 2026. In terms of, that's really close. And so they're also, as well as AI tech, they're investing a lot in quantum computing in the UK. I mean, take that down. I mean, that is a real opportunity for the UK. But yes, again, you're right. The UK may not take it up properly, and that's for the UK to sort out. But the opportunity is there.
Who invests that much money in the UK these days? What's that CEO getting in return? Is he getting one of the Royals' castles
Spaghetti.
or something?
Yeah, great pasta. Exactly. That's all people want these days, Jag.
Yeah. Well, in this case, with NVIDIA, he's kind of been pushed out of the picture in China because China have said stop using NVIDIA technology. And so maybe he's kind of eaten spaghetti with Trump and thought, I don't like the way he slurps. I'm going to the UK because they've got royalty and crisps and great weather.
You can get knighted, Sir Jensen. Yeah.
Sir Jensen Huang. Yeah.
I was interested this past week, and friends sent me an article from the SCMP about somebody that was claimed to be one of the very top thought leaders in AI, who spent his entire academic and working career in the US and is now gone to China, and he's ethnically Chinese. I think he was born in China. And the bottom line of the story was that, he claimed he would have the opportunity in terms of resources to do research and application that was a step change above anything that that would be available to him in the US at any of the big firms there. And so there's the great race on for talent, right? It's an interesting landscape. I don't know in that case if the resources were personal ones or ones that would be made available to him professionally, but either way.
Yes, I guess we'll find out soon.
There's one thing we're forgetting about the UK, and I'm not an ambassador to the UK, guys, by the way. It's just I live in Rio, and a major reason for that is I got jaded by the UK. But the UK has always been a great business hub because of its where it's located. You can fly to, it's much easier to fly from London, east or west, to go to the major hubs, to go to New York, to fly into Europe. To get to from here, for me to get to China from here is a complete nightmare, but not quite as, what is it, 11 hours Hong Kong to London? So the reason why London was originally like a financial hub was because of where it's situated. So let's not forget that as well. Is that still a draw? Do people still care about that talent?
Okay, but then they got the 50% tax, so I don't know. You don't have to sell us on the UK, Matt. And you don't have to win the argument.
Yeah, I'm doing a bad job anyway. So.
Why don't? But thanks for that. Thanks for that, Matt. Thanks for bringing that to us. It was a great equation, and yeah, let's see what happens. But I think there'll be quite a few countries vying for that opportunity. But yeah, the NVIDIA thing's very interesting. Thank you. Let's move on. And you know what, Chris? Very excited to hear what you have to say. Changing consumer behaviors. You've worked all over the world. You run agencies. You're doing a lot in Asia, especially in China. Very excited to hear what you have to tell us.
Yeah, so I think when you coached me the other day around a topic that I wanted to discuss today, my first thought was of things related to tech and AI. But I think what sits at the center of my world and consideration at the moment, when you get past some of the question marks around AI and how that's going to work in our business, is that, we really see at the moment a really strong change taking place in consumer behavior. In part, it's driven by insights that we're gleaning from China, where there's been this massive shift. You asked me earlier, some of the changes that have taken place in China, but over the last several years, particularly post-COVID, there's been this dramatic change taking place, moving away from what has historically been a very, for lack of a better term, superficial kind of market of consumerism, where people are buying brands and labels, to now one that is highly driven by experience. At the same time, there's been a massive slowdown in consumption. So people are kind of picking their spots when they buy now. And altogether, the changes that we're seeing taking place also coincide with a form of marketing in China that I think China excels at, and that is social commerce, right? And the idea that, people are deciding what to buy based on the communities of interest that they have online and the influencers that they follow and the friends that they have in private chat groups. And that collectively, those are the things that are steering purchases in a certain direction. And if brands are not doing an exceptional job of creating fresh stories, both through their content as well as through the products themselves in the form of things like brand collaborations and special editions and all of those things, if they're not doing that, they're being left behind, right? To be blunt, because when consumers are buying less and being very selective in what they buy, they're buying like curators or collectors rather than simply people who want to get a job done by having a new shirt or a new handbag, right? And, I think China's slightly ahead of the curve here, but I see the same thing kind of coming into play in other markets around the world, where brands that can be super story driven in terms of the products they design, doing interesting, novel collaborations with other brands, are the ones that are really accelerating and driving interest in their brands, right? But the ones that are kind of just resting on their laurels and the same products that they've had for many years, or a staid formula for marketing, I think are quickly getting left behind. So that's kind of, the thing that I'm observing in the market. And I think, some of the blunt evidence of that come in the form of just this preponderance of brand collaboration, special edition products that we're seeing, like a LV and Air Force One, a Nike Air Force One mashup, or Crocs and Balenciaga was another incredible example, right? Balenciaga completely rewrote the company fortunes of Crocs that was dying at the time, right? So one is the brand collaboration piece, and the other one comes in the form of these massive pop-ups, activations, and events that brands are using to tell a story. And when they're doing it well, they're doing these activations in a way that they're tapping into an interest group's kind of core emotional goals, right? By tapping into something like an outdoor experience or a piece of music or art or other piece of culture that a group of people are really excited about. And so overall, kind of really seeing that, some of the traditional forms of marketing, particularly in China, and I would extend that to say the rest of Asia, are starting to fall short if they're not applying these kind of tactics from Playbook.
When you mentioned China and you mentioned digital marketing, activations, influencers, the first thing that pops into my mind immediately, and I'm sure it happens to a lot of people, is the lady, the influencer, who is showing products for 1 second, putting on the top, throwing it away. And she made, hundreds of thousands of dollars in like a 5-minute video. And it wasn't just a one-off, because I think this was successful in a kind of a series. I always looked at that and first had jealousy, excitement, and then just thought that is so different to what I'm doing and what I'm working with. And how long will that last? And how long will she still own that particular activation? Because, wow, there's no story there, right? That's just pure capitalism in a communist country.
No, I was going to say, Matt, I think that's representative of a previous MO for marketing in China, right? Where we're seeing, that still exists, but we're seeing kind of a lot more story, a lot more experience kind of being expected by consumers now, right? Where that was, okay, maybe you can make the case that I think Via would be the person you're talking about. There was a guy version of Via called Austin Lee, who is also renowned. They were the two big ones. And yeah, within 30 seconds, they had a product in front of them and shuffled it on, and they sold tens of thousands of units within that very short amount of time. Now, that was raw consumerism, and yet at the same time, her holding that product for a few moments, and perhaps that imbued the product with a little bit of her and the sense of being closer to her at the time, right? But I'm not as enamored with that, as a form of marketing. I think that what we're seeing now is a much more mature kind of form of marketing, and something that, frankly, I think we're seeing definitely in the US starting to emerge. And I don't know about Europe, but it's interesting.
Chris, you mentioned experience, people looking for more experiences. Are you finding that experience over ownership is on the rise there? We see it in other markets around the world, especially amongst younger generations. Spending is shifting towards live performances, immersive exhibitions like Team Lab, hobby-based things like pottery, dancing. Do you see experiences overtaking or challenging outright ownership in China and even in Asia in general?
The short answer is yes, but I think it's really happening with the younger generation who are a little bit fed up with kind of just the overt consumerism that they saw with previous generations. At the same time, I may have sent it to you previously, Jag, but we did a report on the rise of social commerce in the US as well last year. And, we noted very similar changes taking place there with respect to kind of this need and interest on behalf of particularly Gen Z to kind of take their cues to buy from interest groups and wanting to be part of a story, and thereby participate in an experience more than it really was just about the product. So, there's consistency now, I think, with that Gen Z group, with Asia and North America, at least. I would imagine it's the same in Europe.
Matt, do you see the same in Brazil?
In Brazil, from so the majority of my clients are in Anglo-Saxon countries, UK, US, Australia, to be honest, and a bit of France. But I do have currently a Brazilian client, so I am immersed in it. For me, I totally agree with what Chris is saying. Over here, they're very creative, in my opinion, and they're very much into story, brand entertainment. Obviously, there's a massive celebrity culture like everywhere else. And, I dropped off my kid this morning as I'm walking back from school. There's Zico on a massive billboard. He's getting on a bit now. He's the old Brazilian football player, used to play for Flamengo. And he's there grinning in a sort of grandma cardigan, advertising healthcare. And that healthcare will do well because Zico's telling you to buy it. Not a great deal. But I guess the story there is his story attached to that healthcare brand. But they're very creative here, always have been, especially in advertising above the line. And they love a good story. So that's all I can say about Brazil.
I think what I probably see more of here, and it is an experience thing, but it's also... So I've lived in Hong Kong for 10 years, and I think over time, like, influencers here work very differently. And the Instagram culture here is huge, right? So a lot of things you see now that work really well are things that aren't necessarily expensive, but they make them exclusive. So take Labubu, for example, right? That is at a base level, a doll that gets attached to your bag and it costs $120, so £12, £15 maximum, right? And because they made this exclusive version of it, and because like you see somebody, like you say, someone famous has one on their bag, or they've got a dolled up version of it, whatever it is, that has caused a global sensation that I still don't really understand. It's still just a doll attached to a bag, right? And I say it as I sit right here. I'm going to Australia this weekend to deliver one to one of our nieces, right? This is the level it's got to. And I think in Hong Kong especially, I think China is fairly similar. It's this exclusivity, want to be part of a group, want to be seen that you have the things that everybody has already. You do get it. I do see it back in the UK when I go back, but not to the same level you get here. Like the number of coffee shops I see that I just think that place only exists for Instagram. Like people are only going there. They'll create the most disgusting tasting iced tea you've ever seen, but it will sell out because people have to be seen with these things. And I see it more and more here than I do probably, like, I don't know the US, but definitely in the UK. And there's this culture of exclusivity and wanting to be the same as influencers. And they're not huge celebrities always. Sometimes they're kind of micro influencers. And it's just grown and grown and grown. And for a long time, I thought this bubble was going to burst, but I actually don't think it is. I think it's here to stay.
It's funny. I started Totem as a social media agency, and when I started, I vowed not to touch influencers as part of the equation. I said, well, it's a bit icky. I don't really like that whole space. And I also, if I remember correctly, had the idea that, it would kind of fizzle out over some period of time, but not at all. I mean, it just continues to grow strength upon strength. And, the other interesting thing is I'm seeing more and more brands who are taking storytelling. It's not enough that they're doing it on social or through an influencer, but rather now, they're making sure that the products themselves are the story, right? Like, a number of years ago, we worked with this Hong Kong brand, actually helping them grow into China, called 68. They were, I don't know, like Forever 21, that kind of thing, right? And all of their products were goofy kind of memes and everything, but as t-shirts and it was all really organized around the idea that somebody's just going to tell a story through what they're wearing. And, that was playful, fun, and demonstrated that they were kind of part of a community of common understanding, right? And I think, there's the reason that's so prevalent in Asia is that I think there's a much stronger need to feel part of the tribe and the collective, right? That's part of it. But I think also just in places like Canada, I would imagine the UK being the same, older generations are a little bit entrenched in their own old behaviors, right? So, digital behavior for the typical Gen Xer in North America is like, I go onto Google or Amazon, I search for something and I buy. That's it, right? And it's very targeted. Where Gen Z in Canada, the US, they're going to Instagram and TikTok first and kind of vibing, right? What they want to buy, and then seeing who is giving them the right cues as to what the story's all about, right? So it's much more centered around kind of vibing with the community, right, for that younger set.
Yeah, actually, I do have an example that's just reminded me from a client I'm working with in Brazil. And you mentioned there the different types of social media channels. This campaign that I'm doing with a client in Brazil, there's a little bit of story added in. So you have to brief the influencers. It's not just unboxing, show it. There's a little bit of story. So like a fake text message has to arrive. Oh, now it's time for you to do that thing. So they're kind of acting. And this has been put out on Meta and on TikTok. Then it goes organically on Meta and TikTok. Then you see which one does best. Then you put paid with Spark code ads on TikTok, or ad partnerships on Meta. And the best performing ones get the budget behind them. And then those ads, the ad spend directs to purchase normally. What I've found here in Brazil is people are actually clicking on the influencer ads and making purchases in Meta and TikTok. They're just watching and being entertained. And the numbers on TikTok are huge. Lots of clicks, lots of likes, lots of beautiful stats to put in a presentation. 0 sales. Meta, 100% of the sales coming from, and it's exactly the same video, exactly the same creator, exactly the same content. It's just been put in the 2 different places.
Yeah. I mean, the other area of real interest at the moment across Asia are these massive pop-ups and activations that we're seeing, and we've been kind of following these regularly. And over the course of the last 18 months, we started seeing these massive pop-ups, and you've seen them here in Hong Kong as well, right? Like where they take over the waterfront. And there was one, Doraemon, the Japanese character, they took over part of TST, right? Waterfront. They took over an entire mall in Shanghai. And this is stuff like you can see from outer space. Like the scale of it is just mind-boggling, right? And at first I thought, well, these activations are all in the service of kind of jump-starting a bit of a post-COVID lull in terms of brand activation, and brands will do 1 or 2 of these things to kind of just re-engage and get people excited again. And I was, we're coming into Q4 now, and this has been happening for a couple of years. I'm like, the skeptic in me is saying, much like influencers before it, I'm like, this is going to have to kind of fizzle out soon. But I'm now of the opinion that this is kind of the new front line of brand storytelling, right? In a hyper-competitive market like China, it's like, yeah, we need to do this big, fully immersive brand storytelling piece. Otherwise, we simply can't capture this fleeting attention from our consumer base, right? Korea takes it to a whole new level. There's these famous brands like Gentle Monster, the eyewear company, who are renowned for doing these incredible, fully immersive stores where you can't even find eyeglasses, right? Because they've taken over the entire place as basically like a set for the brand. Their sister company is called Tambourines. Recently they won a Cannes Lion for basically creating an entire opera of people sitting on the beach and rolling over, putting their sunglasses on, having chat. So it was like, 30 humans on this man-made beach in the middle of Seoul, right? Where people come by and watch them act out a brand opera, right? So I'm like, for me, this feels like the bleeding edge of where our craft is going to sometimes.
Chris, you mentioned a couple of times the impact of the pandemic and post-pandemic world, and brands trying different things, these big activations. You also mentioned a shift away from China, moving away from, pure materialism and perhaps less logo-driven purchases. Are you finding in China that consumers are more deliberate, more research-heavy, and more value-conscious in this post-pandemic world versus before? Or because I'm trying to think, because they've moved away from being purely materialistic. What's emerged since then? Are they more research-heavy? Are they more deliberate? Are they more value-conscious? Or is it something else?
Yeah, I think a few things are going on all at the same time, Jag. I think we've got there's value consciousness coming up. People are a lot more prudent in what they buy because they don't have as much money, especially young people. I mean, the unemployment rates for youth in China are off the charts, like 30% plus. So, I mean, they've got the support of, parents and grandparents to keep them rolling, but they don't have the money that they used to. So they're being a lot more deliberate in, I think, making purchases that make them happy, right? Things that, really are going to drive that excitement. So part of what I think has emerged is when the tide goes out and all of a sudden the total number of purchases in an economy like that drops by, let's say, for t-shirts, the number of purchases is dropped from 100 to 50. The 50 that people buy have to really stand out and be pretty exciting. And, they've got to do a little bit more to win that attention and desire from a customer. So the things that people are paying a premium for have to fit into this realm of being, I love it, I'm enthusiastic about it, I'm emotionally connected, or they've got to be very value driven and discount, right? Like there's not space for people sitting in between who haven't figured out either a discount model or, highly engaging, experience driven. But I would say 10 years ago, the predominant set of purchases were either, luxury brands, right? Or some mix of discount and value, right? Where now we're kind of seeing this middle emerge, right? Where they're not luxury prices, they're somewhere below that. But again, highly experience focused, right? In terms of how the brand is presented.
Mm-hmm. No, brilliant. Thank you. Super, super interesting. One last question from me, Chris, and I think we'll wrap up. What would be your wrap-up advice to any brand looking to navigate this changing consumer trend in China in particular? What would be your key bit of wrap-up advice?
Yeah, so China specifically, I think the brands that are already in China, very few are going into China that are not already there, right? So the ones that are there, I think they need to really rethink the communities that they're connected with and figure out what are the things that allow them or could allow them to kind of make a big leap in terms of emotional connectedness, right, to customers, either through an interest group or through an influencer that somebody loves or through a third brand that they can do a collaboration with that helps them overcome that gap, right, and connect a little bit more emotionally. But I think, I also think somehow that, this is the sort of challenge that brands are going to end up facing, not just in China, but globally over the coming years. I think that, it's going to be harder and harder for them to win the hearts and minds of consumers. So I think they can learn in China for what's going to happen globally.
Frightening, but also it's an opportunity. Okay, brilliant. No, I found that really interesting. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for taking us through that. And you know what? Thank you for coming on the pod again today. I really appreciate your time. But you're a busy man. You're traveling a lot back and forth between North America and China and Hong Kong and everything. And, so really appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Jag, Jen, and Matt.
No worries. And guys, I think we'll wrap it up there. It's been an excellent episode. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, listeners. This was episode 98 of Disconnected, and we'll see you on the next one.